The market of temptation. Ethan Carter walked through the bustling city market with a restless energy he could not suppress. The late afternoon sun painted long shadows across the cobblestones, illuminating vibrant stalls overflowing with spices, trinkets, and the occasional gleaming artifact that caught the eye. To any passerby, it was just another routine visit, a harmless wander through colors and smells. But for Ethan, each step carried a quiet tension, a pull towards something forbidden he could not yet name. At the far end of the square, a small crowd gathered around a peculiar stall. It was simple, almost unassuming, yet it drew attention with an unusual magnetism. Behind the counter stood two women, Lila and Sophie Kane. Their presence was commanding without effort. Lila, with her fiery auburn hair cascading down her shoulders, had a mischievous sparkle in her amber eyes. Sophie, in contrast, carried herself with calm precision, her dark hair pulled into a sleek ponytail that accentuated her sharp cheekbones and intelligent gaze. Together, they radiated an energy that was both alluring and unsettling. Ethan lingered at the edge of the crowd, pretending to examine a row of handcrafted jewelry, though his attention was entirely elsewhere. Lila caught his gaze first. Her smile was playful, teasing, yet there was an edge to it, a warning. Sophie's look followed, more deliberate, almost calculating, as if she were assessing his intentions. The two exchanged a brief glance, subtle but charged with understanding. "You'll regret this, we won't obey," Lila called out lightly, her voice cutting through the ambient chatter, a mixture of defiance and challenge. It was not a literal threat, but a declaration of autonomy, and the words lingered in Ethan's mind like an echo. He approached the stall with a measured step, his curiosity mingling with a sudden, inexplicable attraction. I'd like to talk," he said, his voice betraying a hint of hesitation he didn't quite recognize. Sophie raised an eyebrow. "Talk, or pretend to?" she asked, her tone sharp yet playful. Lila laughed, a light, musical sound that seemed to wrap around Ethan's senses. "He thinks he can buy our attention for $2, she teased, gesturing toward a small pile of coins on the counter. "Let's see if he dares." Ethan's hand hovered over his wallet, the absurdity of the act not lost on him. $2. It was a symbolic gesture, a challenge to his own restraint rather than a literal purchase. Still, he complied, dropping the coins onto the counter with a hesitant smile. The women exchanged another glance, their amusement barely concealed. For a brief moment, the market faded around him. The noise of bargaining, the smell of roasting nuts, the clatter of coins, all receded into the background. Lila leaned forward slightly, eyes locked on his. "Are you sure you know what you're stepping into?" she asked softly. Ethan swallowed hard. I think I do," he replied, though uncertainty gnawed at the edges of his confidence. Sophie's lips curved into a subtle, knowing smile. "Most people don't," she murmured, her gaze piercing yet enigmatic. The two women stepped aside, granting him passage through the small space between them. Ethan felt the weight of expectation pressing in, as if each movement and word would tip a delicate balance. He realized, with an uncomfortable clarity, that this encounter was not about the coins or the playful challenge. It was about choice, temptation, and the boundaries he was willing to cross. And yet, something deeper stirred inside him, an unspoken curiosity that eclipsed caution. The market's colors and noises seemed to blur, leaving only the two of them, Lila and Sophie, and the question of what might unfold if he let himself follow this perilous path. As he stepped forward, the women's warning echoed again in his mind. "You'll regret this, we won't obey." It was a promise, a dare, and a prelude to consequences he could not yet imagine. Ethan took a deep breath, aware that this moment would mark the beginning of something that would test every aspect of his character, loyalty, and desire. The market around him hummed with life, yet he felt suspended in a delicate tension between reality and temptation. The first step had been taken. The question now was whether he would retreat or continue. And as Lila's playful smirk met his gaze and Sophie's calculated stare held him captive, Ethan understood that whatever choice he made next, his life, and those around him, would never be the same. Whispers in the shadows. The city lights shimmered against the wet pavement as Ethan left the market, the echoes of Lila's laughter and Sophie's knowing gaze still ringing in his mind. Each step toward his apartment felt heavier than the last, burdened with thoughts he had tried to suppress. The encounter at the market was playful, almost surreal, yet it had awakened a restlessness he could neither explain nor contain. Back in his apartment, the familiar hum of appliances and the faint scent of Mia's lavender candles greeted him. He paused at the doorway, torn between the comfort of routine and the exhilaration of the unknown. Mia, his wife of 7 years, was quietly reading in the living room. Her serene presence should have anchored him, yet his mind drifted back to Lila and Sophie, to the spark of defiance and allure that had ensnared his attention. Ethan sank into the chair across from Mia, forcing a smile. "Long day?" he asked, his voice measured, though a hint of tension lurked beneath. Mia looked up, her eyes warm and attentive. "Just work. You seem distracted," she observed, tilting her head slightly. "Everything okay?" He hesitated, the truth balancing precariously on the edge of his lips. "Yeah, just thinking about the market," he said finally, opting for ambiguity. Mia nodded, satisfied with the vague explanation, and returned to her book, unaware of the storm brewing in Ethan's mind. That night, sleep proved elusive. Ethan's thoughts kept circling back to the two women, to their playful defiance, to the words that had etched themselves in his mind. "You'll regret this, we won't obey." What had seemed a harmless challenge now carried the weight of temptation, an invitation to cross a line he had never dared approach before. By midweek, Ethan found himself returning to the city streets, this time not by accident, but by deliberate choice. The market was quieter now, stalls closing for the evening, yet Lila and Sophie remained, lingering near the same corner where he had first encountered them. Their presence was magnetic, each gesture loaded with subtle cues he could not ignore. Lila noticed him first. "Back so soon?" she asked, her voice playful, teasing. Her amber eyes sparkled in the dim light, and Ethan felt a pull he could neither resist nor explain. Sophie stepped forward, her expression calm but piercing. "You've got questions," she stated rather than asked, "and perhaps some doubts. But you're here anyway." Ethan swallowed, aware that his response would reveal more than he intended. I want to understand," he admitted, a mixture of curiosity and vulnerability threading his voice. Their laughter mingled, soft yet charged with tension. Lila tilted her head, her smile teasing yet unreadable. "Understanding comes at a cost," she said. "Are you prepared to pay it?" Sophie's gaze locked onto his, analytical, almost hypnotic. "We don't follow rules," she added. "And neither should you." The air between them seemed to thicken, the mundane noises of the street fading into a blur. Ethan's pulse quickened, not from danger, but from anticipation. Every instinct screamed caution, yet every fiber of desire pulled him closer. He realized that the encounter was no longer just a game. It was a test of his restraint, his morality, and his willingness to embrace the unknown. Over the next hour, conversation flowed like a quiet current, teasing boundaries, revealing glimpses of character and intention. Lila was unguarded, her energy unpredictable yet sincere in moments of fleeting vulnerability. Sophie, in contrast, was precise, measured, every word calculated to probe, challenge, and entice. Ethan found himself drawn to both, though for different reasons. Lila for her warmth and spontaneity, Sophie for her intellect and controlled magnetism. As the evening drew to a close, Ethan realized with a start that he had shared more of himself than he intended. His usual composure was fractured. He had laughed, hesitated, and admitted doubts he had never voiced to anyone. The women's challenge was no longer playful. It was transformative, an intrusion into his emotional and moral landscape that he could not ignore. Stepping back into the quiet streets, Ethan felt the weight of his decisions pressing down upon him. He knew that his return to the market was not the end of the story, but the beginning of a path that might unravel everything he had built. Mia's unaware trust and the magnetic pull of Lila and Sophie now coexisted uneasily in his mind. The night air was cool against his skin as he whispered to himself, almost reflexively, the words he had heard countless times in that small, charged space. "You'll regret this. We won't obey." It was no longer just a warning. It was a promise, one that would shape every choice he would make in the days to come. Ethan's hand lingered on the doorknob of his apartment, hesitant, aware that crossing the threshold back into normalcy would not erase what had begun. The tension between loyalty and temptation had been ignited, and he understood with a quiet certainty that nothing would ever feel the same again. Shadows of deception. The following week, Ethan found himself walking a precarious line between desire and guilt. Every glance at his phone, every message from Lila or Sophie, carried both promise and peril. The city around him seemed sharper now, its noises heightened, its lights more glaring. At work, his mind wandered. He imagined their voices, their smiles, their subtle provocations. Even in mundane moments, pouring coffee, adjusting his tie, passing colleagues in the hall, he felt their influence creeping into his consciousness, uninvited and relentless. That evening, Ethan received a text from Lila. "Meet us at the rooftop garden. Midnight. Don't be late." The simplicity of the message belied the tension it carried. He knew the meeting was not innocent. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he replied, "I'll be there." The rooftop garden was secluded, a hidden oasis of greenery tucked atop an otherwise lifeless building. The faint glow of lanterns illuminated cobblestone paths, casting long, flickering shadows. Lila was already there, leaning against a wrought iron railing, her auburn hair catching the faint breeze. Sophie stood nearby, poised, her dark eyes scanning Ethan's approach with a quiet intensity. "You came," Lila said softly, her voice tinged with curiosity and amusement. "We weren't sure you would." I had to," Ethan admitted, the words feeling heavier than intended. I can't stop thinking about you both." Sophie's gaze sharpened, evaluating him with measured attention. "Thinking is one thing," she said, her tone calm yet commanding. "Acting is another. You're on the threshold, Ethan. Do you know the consequences of crossing it?" He swallowed hard. I'm not sure anymore." Lila stepped closer, a playful smirk tugging at her lips. "Doubt is healthy," she murmured, "but hesitation? That's dangerous." Her amber eyes sparkled, a mixture of warmth and challenge. The night air was charged, the silence of the rooftop punctuated only by the distant hum of the city. Ethan felt his pulse quicken. Their presence was intoxicating, not just physically but emotionally, an intrusion into his carefully ordered world. He realized that each encounter with them forced him to confront parts of himself he had long ignored. Desire, impulsivity, vulnerability, and a thirst for experiences outside the bounds of his marriage. For the next hour, conversation and subtle gestures wove a delicate dance. Lila spoke of dreams and frustrations, laughter punctuating her every word. Sophie was precise, asking pointed questions that probed Ethan's morality, his motivations, his fears. He responded honestly, despite himself, and with each admission, the emotional bonds tightened. The line between playful flirtation and genuine attachment blurred, and Ethan felt the weight of his choices pressing on him with increasing force. Meanwhile, the city below remained oblivious to the clandestine meeting above. Lights flickered in distant windows, cars hummed past on empty streets, and somewhere far off, a dog barked. Yet on that rooftop, time seemed suspended, every glance, every word, every breath heavy with consequence. At one point, Lila placed a hand lightly on Ethan's arm, a gesture of intimacy that made him aware of how far he had already crossed. "You can't have us both," she said softly, a shadow of seriousness threading her usual playfulness. "You need to choose." Sophie's eyes held his, unwavering and intense. "Or risk losing everything," she added. "Not just us, everything you value, including her." The words cut through him like ice. Mia, his wife. the life he had built with her. The laughter, the quiet evenings, the shared memories, they surged into his mind, a sudden reminder of what was at stake. Yet, juxtaposed with the allure before him, the choice felt impossibly complicated. As the night drew to a close, Ethan realized that the meeting had altered something fundamental within him. He had glimpsed a world of passion, spontaneity, and forbidden connection, but at the cost of certainty and moral clarity. The rooftop garden, once serene and inviting, now felt like a threshold, a liminal space where decisions were made, consequences born, and lives irreversibly changed. Stepping away, Ethan felt a shiver, not from the cool breeze, but from the realization that he could not retreat. Lila and Sophie watched him leave, their expressions unreadable, holding on to their own secrets and intentions. Their final words lingered in his mind, echoing the warning that had become almost a mantra. "You'll regret this, we won't obey." As he descended the stairwell back into the city's oblivious hum, Ethan knew that the choices he made next would define not only his fate, but the fragile balance between love, desire, and betrayal. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with tension, yet the pull of the unknown was irresistible. And deep down, he understood that once crossed, this line could never be uncrossed. Reckoning of choices. The apartment felt unusually quiet that evening. Ethan stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker against the dark sky, but the glow brought no comfort. The past weeks, moments of temptation, whispered challenges, and stolen encounters, loomed over him like a storm waiting to break. Lila and Sophie's words, "You'll regret this, we won't obey," echoed in his mind, heavier now than when first spoken, carrying the weight of consequences he could no longer ignore. Mia entered the room, holding a cup of tea, her expression soft but tinged with something Ethan hadn't anticipated, awareness. She placed the cup on the table and met his gaze directly. "Ethan, I know," she said quietly, the words falling between them with measured calm. There was no accusation, only quiet certainty, and it cut deeper than any confrontation could. Ethan's throat tightened. "Mia, I didn't mean for it to go this far," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. You're not telling me the whole story," she interrupted gently, but firmly. "And I think you know it." Her eyes searched his, steady and unwavering, a mirror reflecting his own guilt back at him. The realization of how far he had strayed hit Ethan with a visceral weight. Lila's playful touches, Sophie's calculated provocations, the rooftop meetings, they were no longer harmless games. They had fractured something fragile, something he could no longer assume would simply be repaired with explanations or apologies. In that moment, Ethan understood the gravity of choice. He could not simply retreat to ignorance, nor could he continue to live in the intoxicating haze of temptation. The pull of desire had led him to a precipice, and Mia stood at the edge with him, offering neither judgment nor easy forgiveness, only the clarity of truth. He recounted the events, the market, the rooftop garden, the subtle manipulations, the laughter, the confessions. With each word, the room seemed to contract, focusing on the reality of betrayal, on the choices he had made and the path they had set. Mia listened, her hands folded, her posture composed but unshakable. She did not interrupt, allowing the confession to unfold in its entirety, the weight of honesty filling the silence between them. When he finished, Ethan waited, bracing for anger, tears, or rejection. Instead, Mia exhaled slowly, a quiet resolve settling over her features. "You made your choices," she said, her voice soft but unwavering, "and now you must live with them." It was not a sentence of immediate judgment, but of reckoning. Ethan realized that no apologies could erase what had been done, no explanations could reverse the emotional paths he had traversed. Lila and Sophie had challenged him, but Mia's strength lay in her clarity, her ability to see beyond deception and confront reality with composure. As night deepened, Ethan retreated to the couch, reflecting on the consequences of desire unrestrained. Lila and Sophie had been a test of boundaries, a mirror revealing the fragility of morality when faced with temptation. He felt the echo of their words once more, not as playful provocation, but as a stark reminder. Actions carried weight, and autonomy, whether theirs or his own, demanded accountability. Meanwhile, Mia remained a silent presence, a reminder of trust fractured but not wholly lost. The night stretched, punctuated only by distant city hums and the quiet rhythm of shared breaths. Ethan knew that rebuilding the fractured trust would require time, patience, and unwavering commitment. He could no longer rely on charm, excuses, or distraction. Every action moving forward would need to demonstrate clarity, loyalty, and deliberate choice. By dawn, a tentative understanding settled between them. Ethan recognized the allure of Lila and Sophie, but he also understood the unreplaceable depth of what he risked losing: love, partnership, and a shared life with Mia. The other women, once symbols of excitement and defiance, faded into the background of his consciousness, their power diminished by the clarity of consequence. In the quiet light of morning, Ethan reached for Mia's hand. She allowed the gesture, not as immediate forgiveness, but as acknowledgement of his willingness to face truth and responsibility. The journey ahead was uncertain, filled with the work of healing and reflection, yet it was a path he now understood he must take. And as the first rays of sun spilled across the room, Ethan whispered, almost to himself, "I'll choose differently now." The words felt heavier than any playful dare, yet carried a promise that the lessons of temptation, defiance, and choice would not be forgotten. The chapter of reckoning had closed, but the story of understanding, accountability, and love had only just begun.